So as she was just mentioning, what would a win look like for both countries from this week's summit? Here now to weigh in is our foreign policy panel with the Defense Priorities Policy Director, Benjamin Friedman, and the former spokesperson to the U.S. mission to the United Nations, Hagar Chemali, and Asia expert with the Heritage Foundation, Olivia Enos. Thank you all three for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. Potentially an exciting day. So as we begin our conversation, let's just go down the line, and I'll begin with you, Hagar. What would a win for the U.S. look like, in your opinion?
Well, there are three goals for the Trump administration in going into this summit today. So the first is to define with the North Koreans what denuclearization means. That really means, on our part, explaining to them exactly what we mean, exactly what we need. The second part is to have a roadmap that gets us to denuclearization and an agreement on that. And the third is to freeze any kind of enrichment or advancement in the North Korean proliferation program as we speak right now during those negotiations.
And then, Olivia, as I move to you, we can actually bring up those goals that were the result of the Singapore summit. These were the goals going into that. And we just heard Hagar talk a little bit about some of them. Continue that point. And what do you think a win for the U.S. would be?
It's time for the U.S. to return to its initial request for complete, verifiable, irreversible dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear program. That is the legally required definition in the UN sanctions, and it's the language that we need to return to. But we shouldn't just be making goals on denuclearization. Our U.S. policy and strategy toward North Korea is, frankly, much more complex. It involves also pressing North Korea on some of the thornier issues, including human rights issues, where there's between 80,000 to 120,000 individuals in political prison camps today. I think it's time for President Trump to be bold and to make asks both on denuclearization and human rights in Hanoi.
Yeah, we spoke with one of the negotiators that participated in getting Otto Warmbier out of there yesterday, talking about the human rights violations that go on. Ben, tossing it to you now, what, in your opinion, would be a win for the U.S.?
Well, with all due respect to Olivia, none of that stuff's going to happen. We can't expect progress on human rights in the near term. They're not going to verifiably denuclearize in the near term. Almost everyone understands that. I think what the United States should look for is a process that leads towards normalization or something approaching peace and living with North Korea with some weapons. And I think it's good that we've taken steps towards that, but we're really looking at sort of a theatrical production where they agree to pretend to denuclearize, and we agree to believe in that.
Well, let me take you to this. Now, this is an article that came out overnight from Vox, saying that they have spoken with some insiders who've been involved in the negotiations up until this point. And so we can take a look at some of what they say may happen as a result of, what's going on here. But obviously it could change with the meeting going on with President Trump and Kim Jong-un in just a couple of hours. The tentative deal, according to Vox, would be a declaration to end the Korean War, North Korea to return more U.S. remains, the creation of some U.S. North Korea liaison offices, and North Korea to stop producing nuclear materials at one of its primary facilities, a facility that we heard about during the Singapore summit. Kim Jong-un referenced it, but it would include like 300 different buildings, several acres there. So, Ben, what do you think about that, if any of that ends up being true?
Well, that would be an okay deal, but it would fall pretty far short of denuclearization, let alone verifiable denuclearization. So it's a step towards maybe better relations, but it's pretty far short of what some people at least expect. It would be sort of a poor man's agreed framework, which is what the United States got with the North Koreans back in 1994.
All right, Olivia, your thoughts on those possibly the points that would be in a tentative deal?
I think the two most concerning aspects of this prospective deal are first the idea that a peace declaration is needed right now. I believe that a peace declaration actually threatens the salience and long-term enduring ability for the U.S. to maintain its alliance with South Korea. Even though this would be a very symbolic measure, this could potentially lead to withdrawal of U.S. troops on the peninsula. And perhaps even more concerning is that all of these promises have been made before. North Korea, for example, has promised to dismantle Yongbyon multiple times. And look, here we are in 2019, Yongbyon still in place, but they're promising in return some sort of inter-Korean economic or relaxation of sanctions. This would be huge to give up for really nothing in return. Very concerning.
Hagar, you get the final word here.
Well, sure. So on the point about the end of the Korean War, I agree with Olivia. While I do think that would be a positive step, generally perhaps as a declaration, there can be no give on the removal of U.S. troops from South Korea. That would undermine entirely the stability of the area and certainly the protection of South Korea. I don't think we should, sugarcoat the situation and assume that Kim Jong-un now has no larger aspirations. I also think we have to be very careful in terms of Yongbyon and North Korean promises and certainly about the administration not giving away too much before we get anything. Now, I'm not very worried about the withdrawal of sanctions, but it could happen. We don't know what's going to happen in the one-on-one meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, and that's what I think we need to be careful of.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. We will see what happens today. Thank you.
Thanks.